A few days ago, you had a remarkable meeting up in New York with Senator Charles Schumer.
Yes.
It sounded like a very constructive meeting. He definitely came to the meeting to represent his constituents.
Yes.
And to help them make their case to NOAA on a variety of points. He asked you for four specific things, you and Administrator Lubchenco.
Yes.
They were very concrete. It seemed like they were fairly well thought through. It was only an article in a newspaper, so I don't really know conclusively what happened, but can you tell me what's going to come of that meeting?
Well, so there was an amazing collection of interests in a small room in Shinnecock on Long Island, and we had a nice but admittedly time-constrained conversation that allowed us to at least touch on a number of different issues, and they ran the gamut from the recreational catch and effort data that we've already spoken to some of the impacts of sector-based management on the groundfish fishery in New England, to some broader concerns related to to science and our understanding of fish stocks. And we had just a great conversation, for example, about how some of the inshore surveys have the potential to contribute substantially looking ahead to our understanding of the various fish stocks that are important to fishermen throughout the mid-Atlantic and up into New England. And so Senator Schumer was, as you said, I think very clear in his desire to see us make progress on a number of those fronts, and I can tell you that I have already had several follow-up conversations, not only with people who were in the room, but with others who relate, who have something to share in relation to issues that came up at the meeting that we are continuing to follow up on. I also know that one of the big topics of conversation, which was summer flounder or fluke quotas in the Mid-Atlantic, have already been acted upon at a joint meeting of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council the week immediately following that meeting.
So what's changed there?
So they did, based again on the status of the stock, set a new, or recommend a new catch limit, significantly higher catch limit for fishermen in the region going into 2011, and that is something that we'll be working with the council on and jointly with the commission on going forward.
So is this in effect now for fishermen?
It will be for 2011.
2011.
It will lead to specific management actions for 2011. So the first step in the process is to set that total allowable catch for the year, and then from there unfolds federal action and then individual state actions that essentially allocate that across the fishery and across the region.
And I believe scup was another species under discussion.
No, that's right, and the council took action on the council and the commission took action on quotas for scup as well. And I don't actually have numbers at my fingertips on that, but I know that it is also a topic of conversation.
So that they may be eased up as well, the regulations.
Yeah, I'm searching my brain as we search.
Well, we can follow up on that
here, but
later.
I would like to follow up on that.
That's fine. Enforcement came up too. I know that that's one of the issues you've had to deal with since you've come into this role. There were some pretty severe judgments against fishermen in New York, and I think you've had some changes at the top in your enforcement area. How is that playing out?
So when Dr. Lubchenco came into office a year and a half ago, one of the first things that she did in response to some concerns about transparency and equity in our enforcement efforts was request an Inspector General's review of the NOAA enforcement effort, and that includes both the Office of Law Enforcement within NOAA Fisheries as well as the General Counsel component of fisheries enforcement. The Inspector General has provided to us now 3 reports, and to each of those reports I will say that we have responded aggressively and directly to address the concerns that were raised. I would say that that most of the concerns that were raised, particularly in the initial report, spoke to a lack of consistent systems around the country, and so we have worked hard to, for example, put in policies and more consistent systems as in not only the way that we set and pursue law enforcement priorities, but in the way that fines and other penalties are assessed. There have been additional review mechanisms put into place to ensure equity from region to region across the country in that regard. There have been, there were specific follow-up related to the management of the asset forfeiture fund, which is the fund where many of the fines and penalty proceeds go, and they do help to fund enforcement actions both within the Office of Law Enforcement and on the General Counsel side of the operation. And clearly, in response to the asset forfeiture fund report, there were needs for reforms related to accountability and improved transparency, and Dr. Lubchenco has made specific changes already in that regard. We did, in the course of this process, put into place a new acting chief of our Office of Law Enforcement, Alan Reisenhuber, who is the director of our Office of Sustainable Fisheries, and Alan has been doing in recent months a very good job of helping to shepherd along some of these changes within our Office of Law Enforcement, and that's from a personnel perspective about all I can say with respect to what is happening within the Office of Law Enforcement at this point. But I do feel like it's important to understand that Alan is there, and Alan is doing a good job, and we appreciate the job he's doing there.
Will some of these earlier judgments that some folks allege were over the top going to be reviewed?
So the fourth report that we anticipate from the Inspector General is one that is intended to focus on specific cases, past cases, and we have responded very aggressively to all the recommendations that have been made in the first three reports, and I think it would be premature to sit here today in anticipation of that fourth report and judge what might or might not come of that, other than to suggest that our history is that when the Inspector General has made recommendations, we've responded quickly and aggressively to those. And I think, Ned, there's one other thing that is really important to keep in mind here, sort of at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, and that is that ultimately we all, commercial fishermen, recreational fishermen, the agency, all of the biologists here that do important work on behalf of the fishermen and the resources that we work to protect, depend upon enforcement as an important component of that management process. And so we need to make sure that we have a fair and effective enforcement program, and one that is geared toward achieving compliance with the important laws and regulations that we all put into place. And if we don't have that at the end of the day, we're all going to suffer, including most probably acutely the fishermen themselves, the law-abiding fishermen who depend on a level playing field to conduct business or to get out there and enjoy their recreation.
Great. Let's change up again, and the Interagency Oceans Task Force.
Yes.
When that first came to light under the administration, there was a lot of concern that recreational fishermen and their interests weren't taken into account, and maybe even more importantly, that it didn't seem to grasp the contributions that recreational fishermen have made through their own conservation efforts, organized privately and at a public level over a century. It seems like things have shifted a little bit, but how do you assess that state of play?
Well, so I think you're right. I think that certainly, and my interactions with the machinations of that process have been, at least from a federal agency perspective, been relatively short in duration. But during my time here, I have seen this agency work hard to ensure that the interest not only of recreational fishermen but of commercial fishermen as well to be acknowledged as important in that ocean policy process. And I think that is in fact playing out as we sit here.
Their interests are expressly mentioned in the
Yes.
recommendations, which is an improvement, I guess, over where it was a few months ago.
Again, I think that as we sit here today, there's a strong acknowledgement of not only the importance of recreational and commercial fishermen, around the country, but obviously their dependence on good ocean policy and good coastal and marine spatial planning.
Mm-hmm. When all is said and done, what will you hope the NOAA that you leave behind is like relative to the one that you found? What are, it's always hard to make an impact on a big organization and a big country, but if you could say that a few things improved, what would they be?
So I actually think that some of the challenges that we face actually represent the biggest opportunities. So we've talked about these catch limits and these prescribed rebuilding time frames, and yet if we have the discipline to move through that process to rebuild stocks and to year in and year out fish them at appropriate levels, then we will have made a huge step forward that will be one, a great, I think, legacy to have been a part of. At the same time that we try to fix, I think, some of these management processes, and these again were fixes that were put in motion by the Magnuson Act, and particularly this most recent reauthorization. We do have to also, at the same time, I think, fix some of these underlying social and economic drivers that are so important in our fisheries. And one example of work that is geared in that direction is the catch share policy work. And we do feel strongly, I personally feel very strongly, that while catch shares aren't a panacea, and while catch share programs have to be put in place in a tailored fashion to meet local needs, that they do represent an opportunity to fix on a more systemic basis some of the underlying economic challenges that have vexed fisheries over the decades. And I couldn't leave this without revisiting something that has just been near and dear to me throughout my professional career, and that is our need to place greater emphasis on the underlying habitat on which these fish stocks depend. And in a lot of ways, when you look down the road, the challenges associated with habitat,
striped bass, for instance,
up in inland watersheds, right out into ocean reef systems, threaten to really, if not attended to, undermine a lot of the good fishery management work that I think we're doing a better job at each day. So it really is, that package of, good sound science, attention to underlying habitat issues, more systemic fishery management, and more rigorous fishery management decisions year in and year out, that will, I think, leave us in a much better place economically and recreationally all around our coasts.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Sure thing, Ned.